It's minus 40 degrees. You're inside a tent made of reindeer hide, somewhere in Siberia, thousands of years before anyone wrote anything down. There's a bowl in front of you, and you're about to drink someone else's urine on purpose. Not because you're desperate, not because the water ran out, because it's the safest way to get high. This is the story of one of the strangest survival discoveries in human history. Not tobacco, not alcohol, not weed. Something so bizarre that when explorers first wrote about it centuries later, nobody back home believed them. And by the end of this, you're going to understand why the drive to alter your own mind might be as old and as necessary as the drive to eat. Let's start with the mushroom that started all of it. Amanita muscaria. You've probably seen it without knowing its name. Bright red cap, white spots. It's the mushroom from every fairy tale, every video game, every Christmas card with a cartoon toadstool on it. Grows across the northern hemisphere, in Siberia, in Scandinavia, all the way into North America. And it's poisonous, genuinely toxic if you eat it wrong. But it's also psychoactive. And thousands of years ago, someone in Siberia figured out how to get the high without the risk of dying from it. Here's the part that sounds made up, but isn't. When you eat fly agaric, your body only metabolizes some of the toxic compounds. The psychoactive ones pass through mostly unchanged, which means the first person's urine still contains the high, just with fewer of the dangerous side effects. Because your liver already did some of the filtering for you. Free drugs. Pre-filtered by a friend. Ancient Siberia really said, no one gets left behind. So Siberian shamans figured out that instead of everyone in the group risking the raw mushroom, one person could eat it and everyone else could drink what came out the other end. Safer, more efficient. But why would anyone even try eating a poisonous mushroom in the first place? It's not exactly labeled. That question is part of what drew an American researcher named R. Gordon Wasson into this. In the 1950s and 60s, Wasson, a banker turned amateur ethnomycologist, spent years documenting ritual mushroom use across Siberia and Central Asia. And his research is a big part of why this tradition is even documented at all today. And it turns out humans weren't the only ones who figured this out. Reindeer would actively seek out fly agaric mushrooms, get visibly intoxicated, stumbling around in the snow like it's last call and nobody's driving them home. Then other reindeer would drink their urine to get the same effect. Secondhand. If a reindeer figured this out by accident, it's not exactly a stretch that humans, watching the same herds they depended on for survival, noticed too. So here's the real question. Why would anyone bother with any of this? Why go through this much trouble, this much risk, just to feel different for a few hours? In the 1980s, a psychopharmacologist at UCLA named Ronald Siegel proposed something that reframed this entire conversation. He argued that the drive to seek altered states of consciousness isn't a human weakness or a modern vice. Called it a fourth drive, sitting right alongside hunger, thirst, and sex, something biologically wired into us, not learned, not cultural. If Siegel is right, then what happened in that Siberian tent wasn't some strange cultural detour. It was your ancestors doing something their brains were already built to want. But mushrooms weren't the only answer people found. Thousands of miles away, in a completely different climate, a completely different culture stumbled onto something even stranger. Datura, a wild thorny plant with pale trumpet-shaped flowers growing across the Americas, parts of Asia, parts of Europe. Unlike fly agaric, you don't eat this one to feel good. You barely touch it, and something happens. Datura contains compounds that absorb straight through the skin. In parts of the world, healers and shamans made ointments from it, rubbing it directly onto their bodies and reported experiences of flying, of leaving their bodies entirely. Historian Thomas Hatzis, who wrote an entire book tracing this exact connection, argues these plant-based ointments are the real origin behind European witch trial confessions of flight on broomsticks. Not fantasy, just a very, very strong hallucinogen and an applicator nobody expected. And this wasn't limited to Europe. In parts of the Americas, where Datura is originally native, indigenous cultures used it in coming-of-age rituals so intense that participants sometimes needed days to recover, guided the entire time by someone who stayed sober, specifically to keep them from wandering into a fire or off a cliff while they hallucinated. That role, the sober guide watching over everyone else, shows up independently across cultures on opposite sides of the planet. Someone always had to stay behind and make sure everyone came back. So why would anyone keep using something this dangerous? Because Datura is nothing like fly agaric mushrooms. Too much and you don't get a high, you get delirium, hallucinations you can't distinguish from reality, in some documented cases, death. This wasn't recreational. This was walking right up to the edge of poisoning yourself on purpose, because whatever was on the other side felt worth the risk. Ancient humans really looked at a plant that could kill them and thought, worth a shot. Now compare that to something happening at the same time on the opposite side of the world that was nowhere near as dangerous and is honestly still happening right now while you watch this video. Betel nut. If you've never heard of it, that's surprising, because roughly 600 million people on Earth today still chew it. It comes from the Areca palm, native to South and Southeast Asia, and archaeologists have found direct evidence of humans chewing it going back at least 4,000 years. Some estimates push that number even further. Chewing betel nut delivers a mild stimulant effect, something between coffee and nicotine. Ancient traders carried it across entire ocean routes specifically because of that effect. It became so deeply woven into daily life across parts of Asia and the Pacific that it never actually stopped. There was no European colonization moment that wiped it out. No modern health campaign that killed the habit entirely, at least not yet. It just kept going quietly for 4,000 uninterrupted years. So why did this one survive completely intact, while fly agaric rituals faded into folklore and Datura got banned outright? Nothing about it felt dangerous in the moment. Betel nut never knocked anyone out, never caused delirium, never killed you on the spot the way Datura could. It was just enough of a lift to get through a long afternoon, which, if you think about it, is exactly what half of human civilization has been chasing this entire video. That doesn't mean it was harmless. Modern research has linked long-term betel nut use to serious health risks, including oral cancer, which is exactly why public health campaigns across parts of Asia are trying to reduce it today. But that's a slow, decades-long cost. It never announced itself the way a bad trip or a poisoning would, and a threat that takes 30 years to show up has never been very good at stopping anyone in the moment. Ancient humans weren't weighing 30-year risk. They were weighing today. Think about that for a second. Somewhere right now, someone is doing something their ancestors were doing 4 millennia ago for basically the same reason, not a recreation, not a revival, an unbroken line. So here's the full picture. Around 4,000 years ago, and almost certainly much earlier, humans on completely disconnected continents were independently discovering ways to alter their own minds. In Siberia, a mushroom filtered through a body. In the Americas and parts of Europe, a plant absorbed through the skin, dangerous enough to kill you. In Asia and the Pacific, a nut, chewed daily, mild enough to become permanent. Different chemistry, same drive, no contact between any of them. And it never actually stopped. It just changed its costume. You don't need a Siberian shaman's mushroom tonight. You've got coffee in the morning, a drink after work, a vape in your pocket, different chemicals. Same fourth drive Ronald Siegel was talking about, still running quietly underneath every one of those choices. You're not doing something new. You're doing something your ancestors were doing before they had writing, before they had cities, before they even had a word for what they were feeling. They just knew it felt like something, and they wanted more of it. You still do. You still